So we have everyone here on board. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to today's program. I'm quite happy that everyone was able to make it. And we have a long agenda to go through today. So I will start with general introductions, and then Imagine Scholar can also introduce the team over there in South Africa. And we have some students who joined us from Faith Academy, Canonland in Nigeria. They will also give a short introduction of themselves, followed by a corporate presentation from Adedoyin, who will tell us a bit more about ISNAD-Africa and the essence of the program. Then we would have, I would share a bit about disciplines in fields of renewable energy and environmental sustainability. And then Colleen will take over, tell us a bit more about her experience, followed by Tiana as well. And after each Colleen and Tiana speaking at the end of theirs, we can take some questions. Afterwards, at the end, there will have chance to take a few more questions. So here, just to give a short introduction of who will be speaking today, I can introduce myself first. My name is Soma Agatha Christie Okoro. I'm acting as a manager administration for International Support Network for African Development, that's ISNAD-Africa. I've been active in the renewable energy industry for about almost 5 years now, and working as an engineer both in the solar and the wind sectors. And I'm excited to be sharing my passion also in other areas through with ISNAD-Africa. Then Adedoyin, if you can introduce yourself briefly, then Colleen and Tiana can also say some words about themselves.
Oh, thank you, Soma. Thank you everybody that made the webinar today. My name is Adedoyin Adeleke. I'm the founder and executive director of International Support Network for African Development, ISNAD-Africa. Basically, what we're into is we're trying to raise multi-stakeholder and global support for clean energy transition and climate resilience in Africa. And I've been in the sector for a while, and currently I'm also in a PhD in Italy. Thank you.
Thank you, Doane. Colleen, can you tell us a bit?
Yes, hello, my name is Colleen Fisk, and I work for Renewable Energy Alaska Project here in the United States. And I have been in renewable energy only for about 2 years now, although I've been in education for closer to 5 or 6 years. And so, and REAP has been around, Renewable Energy Alaska Project, or REAP has been around for about 14 years now here in Alaska, advancing clean energy in Alaska and advocating for more renewable energy and energy efficiency.
Thank you. Tiana?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tiana. Thank you very much for the invitation, Agatha and team. I'm actually very happy to be part of this very important webinar. I wish I had something like this when I was also a secondary school student. So anyway, I've been in the sector for about 5 years in the renewable energy sector. And coincidentally, Agatha and I also studied our bachelor's together, so we could go way back as well. But yeah, anyways, I look forward to also sharing a little bit about my journey in renewable energy with you, and also, getting to know you as well, the participants.
Great, thank you very much, Tiana. I'm happy to have you. So we will like to hear from Imagine Scholar on ground.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So did you want us to give an overview of Imagine Scholar or of the Green Team, or both?
Both will be great, please. We have about 10 minutes to hear from you.
Okay, awesome. So Imagine Scholar is an innovative after-school program in the Nkomazi region of South Africa. So we work in a rural town called Kampusha, and we run programming 6 days a week, which includes curriculum about creativity and innovation and personal development. So our students are at the forefront of our programming and curriculum, and we have, we'll see how this turns out. We're all very cozy right now in our learning lab. let's see if you all can see our video. Can you see us?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see you. Great. It's nice to see the group. Lovely.
You can't quite see our faces right now. But yeah, this is the green team. And it's a group of students who are really particularly passionate about the environment and all the issues related to environment. We also have some special guests, our uni students. I'll let them name themselves and introduce themselves.
I'm Queen Melting, second year major in environmental studies.
And Norman, and I'm doing commercial law in Victoria. And yeah, that's what we look like.
All right, I'll show you the rest of the team. So we can we'll go around. Just say your name, starting with Janet.
Hello, I'm Samgiri, and I'm doing my grade 11. And I'm here to grade 10 in domestic school.
My name is Kevin, and I'm doing grade 8.
Hello everyone, my name is Shadrach. I'm doing 11th grade at Ecowas School. So I'm really passionate about environmental sustainability. So I'm looking forward to a lot from you guys.
All right. Were you all able to hear everything?
Not really.
Not all. At least some
Not
part.
all.
I have some idea.
Oh. Did you get to hear everyone's names?
Not all the names, but we caught bits and pieces of it. I think it was fluctuating a little bit. But that's fine. I think we'd like to see their faces, and I have a list of their names with me that I can also share at the end of the program.
Yeah, Sadma, if you like, I can take that list and I can drop it in the comments of the Zoom so that we have all of the bios in the sidebar.
Great idea.
Cool, I'll do that now.
Okay, cool. So we'd like to hear from the students in Nigeria. Oh, unless Imagine Scholar, unless you have more to add. For the students in Imagine Scholar, Ayana, is there anything else you would like to add?
Oh, no. Do you all have any questions for us?
I don't have a question for now. Okay, great. Then we can proceed to the students in Nigeria. If they can say a few words about themselves. Hello, Akilea, are you there?
Hello.
Great.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Go ahead, please.
My name is Bunwadu Kumade, and we're here at Faith Academy, Kenan and Ota. And we're connecting to this webinar, and we're obviously anticipating that we're going to learn a lot concerning renewable energy here at Nigeria. And obviously we'll be able to apply it usefully here.
Great, thank you very much for those words. It's nice to have you join us. It was arranged on last minute, but it was great to have that from you. So Adedoyin, that is over to you now. If you can tell us a bit, introducing ISNAD-Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. And my appreciation to everyone that has made this webinar. In this short presentation, I'll be talking about what ISNAD-Africa stands for and our intention for going on this initiative of educating secondary school students in South Africa and Nigeria, which we're going to extend in the coming days. Can you move on to the next slide? Are you moving for me or I move myself?
You have to share your slide, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Great.
Okay. Sorry, share screen. Just permit me some seconds. That will be done. Okay. Share screen. Oh, I'm missing it up here.
I can also do that for you if that works.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, that's great. Sorry about the short delay. So I'll be talking about talking about what ISNAD-Africa stands for and the reason why we are pursuing educating students in the various parts of the world, particularly in Africa, on sustainable energy, environment, and climate change, and also focusing on career issues on this program. Well, while we read global reports and we notice that while they're talking about, measuring development indexes, performance and development index, we discover that many times, or most times, Africa ranks very low, if not the lowest. But it's an irony because this same Africa has a lot of potential, a lot of resources in terms of natural resources, oil, coffee, timber, gold, and things like that. Unfortunately, we have not been able to maximally exploit some of these resources to increase our performances on development indexes. Because I believe that if we're able to optimally exploit some of our resources, we'll be doing very, very much better in terms of development across the globe. But whereas there are a lot of issues, around this, but there are policy issues, there are financial issues, there are so many issues. But we discovered that we can summarize this thing. A thin line that connects all of these challenges is the energy poverty. Once there is no energy, there can be industrialization, and once we don't have industrialization, we cannot really exploit our resources. For instance, Sub-Saharan Africa currently ranks as the most electricity poor region in the world, yet we have a lot of resources buried in the ground. So, but when you look at it, when we say energy poverty is a challenge, yet on this same continent, we have abundant hydro, solar, geothermal, wind, and things like that. A lot of renewable energy resources that can be exploited for economic transformation, to drive our economy and even social development. So what is limiting? We see that there is a gap. There is a gap between the huge resources are there, and then we also have the huge energy resources that are there that can be used to drive these resources. But we don't have energy, rich in energy resources, but poor in energy supply. What's the problem? We discover that the education system, which is supposed to develop human capacity that would drive some of these things, including talking about financial issues, talking about regulatory issues, even business. Africa has not been able to improve on its academic education standard or the philosophy to include some of these new emerging courses in terms of renewable energy, environment, and climate change, where students can be empowered, can gain knowledge of what they need to know about renewable energy, gain capacity on how to exploit some of these resources for economic transformation. Unlike, for instance, in Europe, when you go to European universities and even America, you find dedicated courses on renewable energy, environment, and climate change, and things like that. There are a number of African countries that do not have one full course dedicated to, for instance, renewable energy. So now, when we identified this, we saw that, yes, we said that we have energy challenge, which I've identified earlier, but we see that the major reason why we have energy challenge lies on our low human capacity, and what drives our human capacity is the education. We're thinking whether we should sit down and wait for somebody to act or rather move and act. So we decided to act. And that was what led to the establishment of ISNAD-Africa. And like I said before, the overall objective is to raise global multi-stakeholder support for clean energy transition and climate resilience in Africa. What we believe is that education is supposed to look at the challenges in society and tailor its courses to solve some of those challenges, which we see that that gap is still not well filled, even though there are some efforts on that now. So through various initiatives, ISNAD-Africa is committed to building human capacity by raising new generation of sustainable energy, environment, and climate change experts in Africa, and also to facilitate North-South collaboration and partnership for knowledge transfer. We also intend to promote multi-stakeholder partnership to bridge the gap between education, research, and practice in our thematic areas. I'm going to list some of these things because I want to go to the ones that really address this program. Then we're looking at, we're committed to increasing environmental literacy among various people groups in African countries. This is what we're doing now. This point, and the first one about building human capacity is what we're doing now. We're increasing the environmental literacy within various people groups. And one of the target people group is the secondary school students. Already we have a program, which I'm going to talk about next, that is supporting students in universities across Africa. We also want to stimulate and promote innovations and networking in the areas of focus, that is sustainable energy, environment, and climate change. Just to illustrate, I'm going to be very brief about this. We have a program called Mentoring for Research Program, where we're supporting African students, that is research students, in various disciplines, accounting, engineering, and so many other courses, who want to do their final year research or thesis on environment and climate change issues. But we noticed that from observation, we saw that even though there are no specified courses on some of these things in our universities, there are students in various departments and disciplines that want to conduct their research on sustainable energy issues. For instance, somebody in accounting talking about renewable energy finance and things like that, and even energy law and things like that. But many of these students have fantastic ideas gained through probably online trainings and all of that. But because the faculty do not have, I mean, their faculty in their home institution do not have human capacity, somebody that can, an expert that can supervise them, these brilliant ideas are always rejected, no matter how brilliant they are. And we see that that is limiting innovation and creativity in Africa. So what we now try to do is, we get students in Africa who wants to do this research and support them, get global researchers across the globe who are willing to support us on this project to support these students. And many of them, not just researchers, because we want to promote industry-relevant research. So we also get people from industry, from think tanks, from government, from international organizations, and things like that. And after that, MRP stands for the Mentoring for Research Program. We also have the EEC outreach, which is called Energy, Environment, and Climate Change Outreach. And also the SEEKers, that's a symposium that will be holding next year. We're working towards that. So these are just some of the mentors that are supporting the program, some of them for World Bank, from Harvard University, IPCC, and other organizations. We're quite encouraged that this is the first edition of the program. And within the first 3 weeks that we opened the program for application last year, December 1st to December 22nd, we had about 17,000 visits to the website by 7,000 people from 120 countries. The number has escalated now. So these are some of the, now the essence of this program. I mentioned in a previous slide that we're working on energy, environment, and climate change outreach. This will be done through mentees, that's the students in Africa that we're supporting. But we're also on our own reaching out to secondary schools across Africa, and this is the first one. We're going to extend it in the coming days. If you look at this view graph, you notice that this talks about a recent release by IRENA. IRENA is the International Renewable Energy Agency based in the UAE, and they provide the number of jobs that renewable energy. We're taking renewable energy, for instance, here, because what we're talking about here is beyond renewable energy. We're talking about sustainable energy, which encompasses energy access, energy efficiency, renewable energy, which some of our speakers will be talking about later on. So talking about, and then we're also talking about environment and climate change. So IRENA has provided a number of jobs that renewable energy, for instance, has provided all over the world, and they rated that to be 10.3 million, that is 10,300,000, as at the end of 2017. In 2017 alone, about 500,000 jobs were provided by renewable energy. But when you come down and look at where Africa is, you discover that when you had this 16, they look at the major, what you see here are the major areas. when you add everything, you discover that Africa accounts for less than 1% of the global jobs provided by renewable energy. Now, you may want to think that, oh yeah, we have economic problem. That's not a problem. The problem is that we have not developed the right skills because we have resources. Some of these experts that, the jobs, some of these experts that are employed from outside, outside Africa, even come to Africa to support us in our project. Fantastic. But it's also essential for us, if we want to be sustainable in our approach to exploiting renewable energy resources in Africa, it's also important for us to build our whole knowledge base. So the challenge is that we have not developed the right skills, which bring us down to what I said earlier about our universities not providing necessary skills, particularly in this line. And this is why we are now organizing this program to say, fine, let's begin to enlighten some of our students in secondary school about this, to see how many of them will have interest in this kind of areas. And for instance, even if you don't have a university that, of course, universities are emerging now with new courses in Africa and even beyond. But even if you end up not going to a university that has a specific field on renewable energy, for instance, but you can specialize in that field from various dimensions. That is why we are organizing this program. We want to help Africa to raise new leaders in terms of in the areas of sustainable energy, environment, and climate change all over Africa to fast track clean energy transition and climate change, climate resilience in Africa. I think I'm going to stop here so that I don't take all the time, and then my colleague can speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doyin. That was very informative, and I hope that has given the students some motivation of why we need them to go into this field of renewable energy or environmental sustainability and climate change issues. So talking of which, I will share with you a bit about the broad discipline in these fields and the thematic areas that we have just talked about. So as soon as Doyin ends, and I can start sharing that.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
Great. So as we have said that there are a lot of fields, educational fields that are involved in this area of sustainability, the environment, and energy efficiency, renewable energy. And it's really that sustainability encompasses a broad set of disciplines, business, technology, social sciences, environmental sciences. And when we say environmental sustainability, we're really concerned with our ability to meet the demands of today in such a way that people are able to live well, but also the future generations can have a good quality of life. That means we need to be aware about reducing pollution, managing waste, responding to the depletion of resources that we have, like clean water, food, energy, and also applying sustainable practices so that we can take advantage of our renewable resources and building a sustainable future for the younger generation, upcoming generation. And renewable energy and environmental sustainability do go hand in hand. And I will show you a video that explains a bit more about what's the impact of, or the advantage, the purpose of having renewable energy and how it applies to the environment. Hello, can you indicate if you can hear the video?
I cannot hear the video. I can hear you.
I cannot hear as well.
Yeah.
We eat with energy.
Okay, it's coming now.
Here we go.
We travel with energy.
Then let's start.
Energy consumption is a huge part of our daily lives. We eat with energy. We travel with energy. We work with energy. And we even flirt with energy. But where does all of this energy come from? Today, we gather most of our energy from coal, oil, and natural gas, also known as fossil fuels. Additionally, we gather energy from biomass, nuclear, and renewables. Fossil fuels consist of extracted decomposed organisms and plants that existed millions of years ago. Biomass converts plants into biometric material to produce energy. Nuclear energy is released during nuclear fusion. Lastly, renewable energy comes from a source that's not depleted when used, such as wind or solar power. But what's the profound difference between them? How they affect our planet? Fossil fuels cost more than what we pay at the pump and impacts our environments in many ways. These impacts include global warming, air quality deterioration, oil spills, and acid rain. It's also projected that fossil fuel resources will be depleted within the next 50 to 100 years. Biomass and nuclear energy also have similar issues. We need a solution relatively fast, and luckily, we have one. Renewable energy comes from resources which naturally replenish in our lifetime, whereas fossil fuels are a one-time use resource in the human timescale. Resources for renewable energy include sunlight, wind, rain, tides, waves, and geothermal heat. The best part is that we don't need to compromise our planet to harness it, nor do we have to rely on other nations for these resources, which history has shown to be a contributor to war, famine, and political instability. So, how do we get this to look like this? Presently, we have the technology to be 100% renewable reliant. The truth is, our infrastructure is built around our fossil fuel dependency. If we could convert our infrastructure to what's known as a supergrid, we would be able to rely on clean, renewable energy. So, what's it going to be? Will our children live in a world full of pollution, or should they continue the path of evolution? To learn more about a 100% clean, renewable energy future, visit thesolutionproject.org.
So, as you have heard, it's not only about clean energy, but also even for world peace, because then there's the renewable resources are not limited, they are free and they're abundant, and anyone can take advantage of them. And to proceed, I can give you some more examples about kind of green professions, so that we know that green professions are not like only about energy and engineering and science, but also business and law and governance and politics. So depending on your own interests and your strengths, you can be able to choose which direction you go and still find a path to contribute to renewable energy or environmental sustainability topics. Let's give some example. Environmental scientists are dealing with all the issues pertaining to our environment, the water, the sea, the soils, the plants, and the impact of human activity on the damaging effects it can have on the environment. So if we see in the top right photo, a video of this ocean and so much waste and plastic that is found in the ocean that causing so much problems and causing global concerns. Even there's the problem that it can even endanger the aquatic life. So people who address these various problems are environmental scientists that are studying different aspects of it, biologists, chemists, even food scientists that are concerned with who can apply the knowledge to how we can produce food in a sustainable way, such that we don't damage the environment, but we also have healthy food that is available for everyone. Agriculturalists as well, who deal into sustainable farming practices, architects who can design buildings that are energy efficient, chemical and process engineers, even journalists who cover everywhere, keep us informed and cover the damaging effects of climate change and make people more aware of it. Public health workers, because we know that pollution and poor sanitation practices can cause a lot of health problems and diseases. In Africa, there's also one concern. Therefore, public health workers are also important in this field. The same as academics, researchers, as I mentioned earlier, that we do need academics and researchers in the field. And to build a renewable energy plant, there is a lot of expertise that goes into it. So, for example, the solar plant. You know, in solar plants, there's solar cells made up of material, semiconductor material or organic materials that can capture the energy from the sun and release electrons and produce electricity. We have physicists who work on designing that, or semiconductor material scientists who design materials that can be highly efficient, that can convert as much energy as possible to the sun, from the sun or from the wind, from the sun for solar cells. Production engineers or industrial engineers who deal with the manufacturing of these components. Electrical and electronics engineers, mechanical engineers. If you see, like a wind turbine has a lot of mechanical parts. It has a drivetrain, it has a gearbox, all the blade and the moving components. Mechanical engineers deal with this subject and the design and working on that and maintenance of it. Civil engineers, marine engineers for turbines that are installed offshore. They have to study the ocean, know the best places to place the turbines, and understand as well how it affects marine life. Even meteorologists who kind of forecast how much sun and wind can be obtained from each area and how much energy can be converted from the sun and the wind. Computer software developers as well, who, there's a lot of software that goes into this system. So even the software used to design them and the software that is used to capture the energy, to capture the data from those turbines and from those solar assets to monitor them. So there is a lot that goes, that software or computer scientists could do in this field as well. And then finally, it's not just scientists or engineers, as we mentioned before. There's the business managers, project managers, legal practitioners who can understand the laws of the area and how it applies when one wants to go and build an asset there. And to build an asset, you need money and you need to have a business around that. You need to raise the funding, the financing to do it. And there we also have those investment experts, financial analysts, because in the end, to build such renewable plants, one has to kind of make it sustainable. And sustainable also involves making it to be a business that is viable, because without the money, then it dies off and then we are not able to continue. Policymakers as well, and importantly, educators, academics, researchers, even entrepreneurs. In Nigeria, for example, there have been a lot of entrepreneurs that have started up solar businesses who help to install solar in different parts of the country. So that's something that's also growing. And in countries like Tanzania, Kenya, so many businesses coming up. Therefore, there's business elements as well. So as a student, if that is something you're interested in, whichever direction you want to go, you definitely find a role to play in the industry for renewable energy and environmental sustainability. And talking of which, I will then hand over to Colleen to share with us her own experience and the work that she does. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let me get share my screen here. Oops, gotta wait till you've closed yours, but while I'm waiting for that, if you'll indulge me for a minute, I'm going
on a Saturday.
Oh, no, I'm so happy. I'm so glad that you have me here today. I really appreciate that Edwin invited me and Soma was able to speak with her a bit over email, and I'm just very excited to be a part of this. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences and a lot about the organization that I work with and the work that they do and that they have been doing. And of course, if at any time you have any questions, you can, there will be time at the end once I'm done talking, but you can also type any questions into the chat bar. And I don't see how I can see them while I'm speaking, but hopefully I can get to them after the end. Right now I'm just seeing videos on my screen here. So a little bit about myself. I grew up here. Oh, here we go. Okay, yes, when somebody types, looks like there's a little icon that shows up as a chat. Okay, great. Yes. So if you do have a question, I got a little alert there when you type in. So my background, I grew up here in Alaska, and I'm actually this morning I'm watching my mom's farm, and I grew up here on this farm, a small hobby farm, horses, chickens, goats, sheep. Did a lot of raising our own food as I grew up here, and I went out of state for college, so I went to an Oregon State University, and then when I came back to Alaska, as I always knew I would because I love it here, I earned my degree in education and worked in education for a while before mostly secondary education, before I worked for Renewable Energy Alaska project. And I didn't have a large background in renewable energy before I started with this, but because of my education background, they hired me as the energy education director. And that means that I travel around the state, and it's a very large state, teaching about energy efficiency and clean energy in kindergarten through 12th grade. And I also do trainings for teachers and participate in different workshops and different ways of educating around the state. So I'll talk a little bit about that as I go, but here we go. Also going to talk a little bit about REAP. And REAP has been around since 2004. It's a nonprofit organization, and it's a coalition of many different organizations. So electric utilities, Alaska Native Corporation, clean energy developers, people who do projects in the state on clean energy, other non-government organizations, and they all work together towards REAP's mission here, which I put on here, facilitating increased development of renewable energy. But we also don't really keep our focus very narrow on the renewable energy part. We talk a lot about energy efficiency, and because we definitely believe that energy efficiency has to happen first before you do renewable energy. In Alaska, we have a lot of communities that are very spread out, not on a road system, and they get their electricity. They have to fly or barge in diesel or other fossil fuels to produce their electricity. And of course, heating is a major concern in Alaska, and they use a lot of fuel oil to produce their energy, and it can get very expensive. And so we talk a lot about reducing your use and dependence on those fossil fuels first, so that when you do, as we are trying to transition towards renewable energy, that you don't have to use as much energy, you don't have to have as large of a system for that, to produce the energy that you need to live a comfortable life. I did want to throw this map up here. So the red marker is where REAP is based in Anchorage, and we are a small organization of staff. There's only about 6 of us. And then I was actually in Kodiak this past week. I just flew back to Anchorage last night. And so that's what the blue dot is. That's Kodiak. I was traveling there and visiting schools and participating in a workshop there this past week. And I love Alaska, and I love my job, but I kind of wanted to show a little bit of a sense of scale here of where I'm at right now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the why we do this, why REAP finds this important, and also why I personally find this very important. And this graph shows part of that. So many Alaskans pay more than 50% of their take-home pay on energy. And this is especially because of those rural areas where they don't have access to some of the energy that, where I live in Anchorage and where I grew up. We have much easier access. We were on the road systems. We had much easier access to energy, but a lot of places in Alaska do not have great, easy access. And this graph shows the difference in how much Alaskans pay compared to the rest of the United States for their electricity, for their natural gas. Natural gas is how we get our heating, and about half the population gets their heating from natural gas. And this doesn't have the rates for the fuel oil and diesel that they get for their heating, mostly because most of the rest of the United States does not get their heating from fuel oils. They don't have as much comparison there. They mostly get their heating also from natural gas. But this is such a huge issue because there are definitely problems with energy poverty here in Alaska. And so this slide shows some of the communities around the state that already are on renewable energy. We have about 250 communities around the state, and most of those are off the road system, but 70 of them have some sort of combination. One of the most common combination is a wind diesel hybrid system. And that software that Sanma was talking about is very important for when you have combination systems that have multiple different types of resources for energy. And so being able to integrate those well and using them in an efficient and cost-effective way is the software portion of that is very important. And when Edwin was talking about the human capacity building that you were working on in Africa, that is also a drawback. An issue that we have in Alaska is the capacity building, especially when we have these really small communities that aren't on the road system, and they also have issues with education, or they have to travel a very long way to get to a university, even within our own state, to be able to get training, or even not even necessarily university, but even a technical school where they can learn how to do run their own power plant, or even their water treatment, or anything that is associated with that. And so that human capacity building is very important. And that's one of the reasons why REAP has so much focus on energy education, and why, and I wasn't the first person to do energy education for REAP. There were several people before me who also have done energy education. But that's part of that human capacity, is developing that energy literacy and the energy education, so that those who are in the, in these communities can work in these microgrids, as we call them, that are separate from our larger grid, and work in these microgrids, or hopefully develop more renewable energy in communities that don't already have some renewable energy in their grid. This is another important reason why I find this very important. Alaska, as part of the Arctic, is disproportionately affected by climate change. In December, we had the hottest month on record in Utqiagvik, or Barrow, which is in the northernmost point of Alaska, which is also the northernmost point in the United States. There were so many days, every single day in December was above average, so far above average that their scientific equipment that was automatically taking temperatures marked them all as anomalies, because it was so warm in December. And so, of course, you've probably seen a lot of different pictures from NASA and heard about the ice melting, and that issue of that sea ice, even the summer sea ice and the winter sea ice, is very critical up here in Alaska. And so as one of the ways, and certainly not the only way, but one of the ways that we can help reduce our impact is by looking at reducing our fossil fuels emissions through our energy production. Okay, and so Katie asks, would you mind explaining grid technology and how microgrids work in brief? Yes, happy to. So I'm going to go back a slide here. And, oops, there we go. So grid technology, the grid is the interconnection of different power plants that produce electricity for different communities. And so in Alaska, let's see if I have a little marker here. We have a grid, basically, so we have down here to Homer, up to Anchorage, up to Fairbanks here. We have this grid here. So there is mostly, that's our large so-called grid in Alaska. And it's much, much smaller than Canada or the United States, but that is our main grid. This is where a little over half of our population lives. Now, these rest of these communities where you can see these little icons for the wind turbine, we have the sun for solar, like over here in Caltag. We have Kodiak, which has wind, hydro, and energy storage systems. These are all not connected to these other communities. They have their own standalone grid, and that's called a microgrid, because it's just a very small version of an electrical grid. And in the lower 48 and Canada and other places, when you have a much larger grid, you have a lot of large cities, you have a lot of large power plants, communities or hospitals or other emergency shelter places will have microgrids that can work separately from the larger grid. And so they call that a microgrid because it can disconnect from the larger grid, but it doesn't normally work separately from the larger grid on a day-to-day basis. In Alaska and in there's other Arctic communities, and I imagine communities in any communities that are on islands like Hawaii. There are communities in Africa who are on microgrids. These communities aren't connected to a larger grid, so they only have themselves, and that does make it a lot more difficult for managing the resources and being able to maintain a safe frequency for the electricity. And there are a lot of different aspects that come into that. And of course, when you don't have the capacity or the knowledge to be able to work these systems properly, that can cause a lot of problems. And so this is why as REAP, we want to support these rural communities that have such high costs of energy and have a lot more challenges compared to like where I live down here in Anchorage, where we're connected to a larger grid. Almost half of our population lives there in Anchorage. And so we're very spread out around this very large state. And go back to the arrow. Okay, my comment here. Okay, good. Hopefully that helps. Thank you. Yes, happy to answer any questions as they come up. And hopefully I don't go over my time here. Okay, so this is kind of the why. So the why is, of course, the climate change. And I know all very familiar with climate change, and Alaska, as other Arctic and Antarctic areas, are disproportionately affected by climate change. And then in Alaska, of course, we have the high cost of energy. And another issue with the climate change is we have a lot of coastal erosion. So we have about 10 communities that need to move, and they're having a hard time, and in part because of where their energy sources are going to come from. When they do move, there's a lot of issues that are associated with that. So REAP's mission, so that's a little bit of the why, and I'm going to go into the how do we start addressing some of these issues. And so REAP's mission, remember, is we're advancing renewable energy through advocacy, training, education, and collaboration. Those are the 4 ways that we do that. So I'm going to briefly talk about how we do that in each of those areas, although all of the areas overlap and are very interconnected with each other, as you see as I discuss this as we go through. And as I go through this, it will also touch on some of the areas that you have availability for careers in clean energy. So I'll try not to get too off topic as I talk about this. I get a little bit excited, so hopefully I don't get too off topic here.
Okay,
so
first, just mention that we have like 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yep. Okay, thank you. I'll go through this pretty quickly. Appreciate that. I meant to start a timer and then forgot. All right, so advocacy. So don't worry about this slide. I just want to point out that we've been working with clean energy for a very long time. And one of the ways that REAP has done that is we had a home energy rebate program. And so this is where people were upgrading their houses and making them more energy efficient, and they got some money back for the money that they spent on that from the state. We also had Renewable Energy Fund that helped communities develop clean energy in their communities through biomass, heat recovery. Heat recovery is an important one. As I said, heating, of course, is very important here in Alaska. And we also have an Emerging Technologies Fund. So things like tidal and wave energy, hydrokinetic. We have some of the largest tidal ranges in the North America up here. And so how we're able to capture that is not a technology that is able to be used in an effective manner yet, but being able to support that and research that so that we can capture it is important. So training is another important part. I've mentioned this about the human capacity. And so the training for this, for example, ACEP, which is one of our partners, Alaska Center for Energy and Power, they did an Arctic Remote Energy Networks Academy where they took 20 people from the US, Canada, and Iceland, and they traveled to Alaska, US, and Canada and Iceland, and they looked at how different communities and different researchers are addressing some of these issues in Arctic areas around microgrid technology. And then energy management. This is an important part in terms of clean energy, is being able to use your resources wisely. So this can be energy management of a large commercial building or even a school, which I work with a lot more, commercial personally, but also for power plants so that they are able to use, as I mentioned earlier, that software, for example, using wind and diesel together and being able to manage that in a way that's efficient. Education, which is what I work with mostly. This is looking at these energy literacy principles. There are 7 of them from the Department of Energy. And I just wanted to throw these up here because it's an idea of how you look at energy all the way from the basics of what is energy, where is it coming from, all the way up to the importance of making decisions, and quality of life and of individuals and societies is affected by energy choices, as we all know. These are a couple of the curriculums that I use that are all free and easy to use, and it's a great way, but it's very basic, it's for the K through 12, looking at how is energy used, how do we calculate our electricity use, how much do appliances cost. And the same thing, we have a Wind for Schools program where we discuss wind energy, how does it work. There are 7 schools throughout the state that have wind turbines at their schools, and of course many more schools have wind turbines that are part of their community. And then collaboration, this is one of the, I think this is the last piece, but it's probably the most important, is that even throughout all of those other parts, is that we're all working together. So REAP, like I said, is over 80 organizations, and we're all working together to advance clean energy in Alaska. And we also look at it throughout the United States, the Islanded Grid Resource Center, that mostly it's the US and Maine working together, but also Hawaii is also an important one, and people throughout the North America are working on this to be able to support, especially wind diesel systems in small communities, but just any type of small system also. See another comment? Okay. So here's some wind diesel systems, but I know I'm running short on time here, so yay, pretty pictures of Alaska. There you go. And then I do want to, hopefully if I have another minute here, talk about the SSP, the Sustainable Southeast Partnership, and they are looking at how to I saw several people were very much interested in the food security, which is a very important, the food energy nexus up here in Alaska. Some estimates say that we import 90% of our food, and that takes a lot of energy, very far from where the food is produced. And it's also not very sustainable. And so this organization looks at the energy, the food, commercial fisheries and forestry and local businesses, and how they can all work together. There are 7 different communities in Southeast Alaska working on this together, and so that they are having economic development in addition to having energy independence and food security, all in a sustainable way. Okay, went through those last ones pretty quickly. Do we have a minute for questions, hopefully?
Yeah, we can use a minute or 2. Thank you very much, Colleen.
Okay. Thank you.
And over to, I think we might have a question or 2 from Imagine's caller.
Okay, great.
And use the next 2 minutes to do that quickly, and then Tiana can share hers with us.
Okay.
Any questions from the green team? Okay.
Yeah, we have questions.
Yes.
Okay, then you can take one or two. We have a minute or two, and then go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
So,
I can hear you.
So before I came to the meeting, I had so many questions about kind of like what inspires Collins and then the why behind, but throughout the kind of like your slide, you answered my question. So my follow-up question is like, besides traveling and teaching and working with teachers, what do you find fascinating in your field of energy renewable as a director?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So I think all of these new technologies that are working together. So my passion is Alaska and working with the students and the people here, but it's very interesting how well these people are able to use new technologies or new ways of doing old things. You know, we don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel, and how great people are at working on that. On Kodiak Island, for example, they are a 99% renewable energy. It was great to be there this past week. They use wind, hydro, and energy storage to be able to have 99% renewable electricity. And they're able to do that by utilizing their resources, and they just have, you know, they're such front runners. You know, someone has to start that, and there are such great people working on that and doing that here in Alaska. It really fascinates me how these people are so, you know, I always think, oh, you guys are so much smarter than me, doing such great work.
Yeah, second question. My question is, you know, as an organization, I had a friend who goes to like Colorado University, and he's trying to fight the whole carbon boom situation. And he's like, you know, working on like in the field of like researching like nanotechnology and stuff like that. So I want to find out if your organization has a department of that sort, so that maybe I can just like, you know, refer him to you guys, to like, you know, be part of like, you know, the learning.
I'm having a really hard time hearing you. It's very quiet.
Oh. So what I'm saying,
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's better.
So what I'm saying is, I have a friend who goes to Colorado University, and he's getting into the field of like, you know, fighting the whole carbon boom situation, and he's working on like, you know, also like, you know, understanding nanotechnology and just like, you know, learning about it, and also like finding out ways that can make it work. I mean, I know they said it's gonna be put into like, you know, practicals 20 years from now, but you know, if there's someone who can speed up the whole the research or like the whole situation, like, you know, be a catalyst for that, we'll probably work in like, say, next 5 years. So what I want to find out is, does your organization have a department that deals with like, you know, research when it comes to like, you know, nanotechnology and solar energy, and also like, you know, using that like as part of like, you know, renewable energy?
Yeah. So that's really, nanotechnology is definitely very fascinating. Someone asked, what is fascinating? Nanotechnology is amazing. So REAP, we don't have a department that does that. We ourselves don't do research. We have organizations who are who are member organizations that do REAP, but our staff ourselves doesn't do research. And I don't know of anybody in Alaska who is doing nano research technology, especially, well, at least in terms of renewables. And the sustainability.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry, we are kind of out of time, but we can, maybe if we have some time at the end, we could take one or two more questions. But let's give Tiana the chance to share with us. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me this time to speak. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks, Colleen.
I'll hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, Colleen. That was also very insightful. I really enjoyed that. Okay, here we go. Share screen. Okay, I hope everybody can see my presentation slides. Okay, great. Super. Okay, so I'm happy that everybody's asking questions, which means that everybody's paying attention. So I'm coming from a little bit of a different angle. My presentation slides are going to be about my personal journey into a career of renewable energy. And with these slides, I hope to impart three things. First is to try to inspire a little bit by giving you an insight into my personal, path into this space. And so, yeah, to provide a lot of insight into what, an actual career in renewable energy could look like potentially. And also to give you a little bit of encouragement because, I guess all of you are secondary school students. You're about to go into, some kind of further education, be it at a university or a technical center or, just venturing off into business, whatever it be, what you may seem to envisage now may not necessarily be where you will end up, at some point down the line, which is fine, which is really okay. Because as long as we redirect our path and we make sure that we're building our career into something that is meaningful, that gives us a lot of joy, that gives also a lot of good to our communities and so on. So my brief background, I'll start off with my educational background. So I completed my secondary school in Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, we did the A-level, which our Nigerian colleagues might be able to relate to. I think in South Africa, it's slightly different. It's the matric. But anyways, for A-level, we are supposed to choose in the last 2 years of high school, 3 specialization subjects. So that was a little bit difficult, but I knew that, I always wanted to be in the sciences, whether I was going to be an engineer or go into the medical profession, whatever it be, I chose mathematics, chemistry, physics. I also found languages super important, so I also continued with an advanced level in French, and at our school, English was mandatory. So at the end of high school, it came a time to choose, what to do, like to continue, into tertiary education. So I chose to go and study in Germany. And at that point, I was pretty sure that I wanted to be an engineer. But I wasn't sure which type of engineer, either an electrical or a mechanical or a biochemical. It was very, very foggy. So I kind of did an eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and I chose to do electrical and computer engineering. And I studied this at Jacobs University in the north of Germany. And so the first year of university was very fun. It was quite interesting and quite manageable. But then it came into the second year where things got a little bit more harder, and I realized that actually this is not maybe necessarily the line that I want to pursue further. But I came to a point halfway where I thought, okay, it's either I'm going to lose a year and a half and do another degree, or I invest another year and a half, make the most out of it, and complete a degree, and in the meantime try to find what my passion really is, because it was still in engineering, but not necessarily so much into electrical engineering. So when I completed my bachelor's degree, I wasn't ready to go into the workforce. So I really didn't think of myself as an electrical engineer, and I felt that I was not entering a passion of renewable energy and a clean technology. So I really wanted to pursue this further. So I embarked on a master's course in engineering physics with a specialization in renewable energy. So this provides basically a brief educational background of where I'm coming from. But of course, learning never stops. And I'll show you also later, some of the other, training courses that I ventured off into. Okay. All right, so a little bit about the start of my renewable energy career. All right, so it all started off when I was a student. I was doing a lot of internships and part-time research projects, and also student assistant type projects at research institutes, all related to the field that I was studying in. And I would like to encourage you also one day when you do get to either university or wherever it is, always look for having that practical experience. It gives you really a real life exposure into what this field is all about, and it gives you also an opportunity to realign your goals a little bit. What it meant for me was that I was doing a lot of work in research institutes, and I realized that this wasn't for me. I wanted to be a lot more applied, a lot more on the ground. I wanted to work with communities. I didn't want to be in a lab, which I'm not saying is a bad thing to do. It works for some people, but personally, I wanted really to be on the ground and really see how this technology is being utilized in a community. So after my master's studies, I applied for an internship position, a 6-month internship position with GIZ in South Africa. GIZ is actually the German technology sort of development organization, basically, of the government of Germany. And they are a very, very fascinating organization. I always wanted to work with them. They're very much on the ground. They do some interesting projects. But it came a time when I needed to apply for a visa for South Africa, and I was, kind of being taken around, and, told that I needed to wait a very long time and apply for a work permit. To cut the long story short, internship opportunity failed. I couldn't attend it on time. And after that, I was quite upset about that. And I thought, well, I've just lost my opportunity to work for this very inspiring company, which I always wanted to work on. What do I do next? So I was looking around. I was in Zimbabwe at the time. And I managed to, after a couple of months, get an official position as a renewable energy research scientist at the government's Energy Technology Institute. But after a few months, I also ran into some work permit trouble, and it was also a little bit of a fail, I have to say. And I had to also leave because of these reasons. And then I also found myself again very stuck and thinking, okay, where should I go next? What to do? So now I call this a restart of my renewable energy career. It meant a lot of applying and hoping and waiting and, getting a lot of rejections to my applications and applying again. This process took about half a year. And the only opportunity I got after half a year was a 2-month internship. But it was at the International Renewable Energy Agency, at IRENA, which was mentioned before. And I always knew this organization through my studies, and I always thought, well, this is the be all and end all of renewables. I will never get there. But this opportunity, internship opportunity, even though it was an internship, and I felt like, but I already have a master's degree and I already had a full-time proper position, and now I'm going back to being student material. But I'm really happy that I embarked on it, because this 2-month internship ended up into an 8-month internship. And then I ended up being offered a proper position as a junior professional associate, where I served for 2 years and 8 months. And after that, I was promoted to an associate program officer for Sub-Saharan Africa, where I served for 1.5 years. So I hope this gives you a little bit of a glimpse of, the sort of zigzag way that you might have to take in this sector, because it is not a very, don't misunderstand me, but it's not a very straightforward sector. It requires many different skills. There are a lot of different ways to embark on this journey, either through what we discussed before as a social scientist, as an engineer, and it tends to be not a straightforward field as, like, for example, going into research or whatever it is. So anyways, this was my zigzag. And I would like to just give you a glimpse of what it was like to work at IRENA. So for those of us who don't know, IRENA is headquartered in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, but we also have they also have an office in Bonn in Germany, a smaller office. It is an intergovernmental organization. That means it works a little bit like the principles of the United Nations. So it has member countries that are that compose IRENA. So till date, they have 157 member countries, and they all convene annually to give to basically agree on IRENA's work program. And they are also the ones who mandate the organization to promote all forms of renewable energy technologies. It's a very high-level, I would say, organization that deals with governments, with policymakers, with ministers on a daily basis, sometimes even the heads of states, with other international organizations that are all setting the agenda for renewable energy, and that are also fighting a lot of lobby from the coal industry and the fossil fuel industry. So in as much as it's not maybe necessarily in its nascent stage, renewable energy, it very much is still in, it's a little bit of a young teenager. So, it does need to prove its value in the world, its economic value. I think all of us on this webinar understand that, the good in pursuing, renewable energies, but a lot of people who are making money from fossil fuels don't see it that way. So there's a lot of need to, create a lot of advocacy to try to influence policy, to speak to a wide range of stakeholders, to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to the development of the energy sector. Also, renewable energy, I would also like to mention, is very important in the context of Africa, because like how Colleen was explaining earlier, there is a main grid, and on the main grid, it's easy to put whatever source of energy that we want to put there, and connect to the households that are connected to the main grid. But in Africa, the main grid also, similarly like in Alaska, doesn't span a lot of places. So actually, in a lot of countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we have electrification rates of around maybe 15%. So it's 15% of the population of a country that has access to electricity, to an actual main grid. And renewable energy is able to solve that problem because it has the potential to be decentralized. So you're able to make it very small or very big, or customized for a small community, a big community, for whatever resource that community has, be it wind or solar, or to mix it, and so on. So it has a value add in addressing the whole point of energy access and the whole problem of energy access, which, by the way, is a development goal that we need to reach by 2030. We are all supposed to have universal access to modern energy. And we, of course, know the benefits of energy, as we mentioned before. It's necessary for our advancement. It's necessary for our quality of life, for accessing different opportunities, and leaving out a lot of our people who are living in remote or rural areas, is not good, and to leave them without energy or leave them with very conventional methods of energy. So another project I wanted to sort of highlight here is, and a project I personally managed at IRENA, is called Prosper. It's promoting a sustainable solar PV market in Ecowas. Ecowas stands for the Economic Community of West African States. It spans 15 countries in West Africa, and I'm sure our Nigerian colleagues are well aware of this. So Prosper was a program where we looked at developing local capacities. We've mentioned before that there is a serious lack of capacity to go for renewable energies. This capacity lacks in our governments, in our ministries, so people who are our policymakers. It lacks with our parliamentarians who are making the laws for us. It also lacks within our regulatory institutions who are making regulations that are maybe sometimes leaving renewable energy out of the picture. Also, our utilities are not used to developing and investing in projects that are renewable, but they rather look at fossil fuel, coal investments, which is something that they've been doing for decades and something that they're used to. They have very little knowledge in renewable energy. We also have financial institutions. Why are financial institutions important? Because we have private sector that is trying to go into renewable energy. And when they go to a financial institution and ask for a loan to develop a project, the financial institutions don't have a renewable energy understanding to really be able to assess, is this something that I want to give you money for? Most of the time they see it as something very risky because they don't understand it, and thus there is very little funding that goes for renewable energy. So a lot of these things need to change, and we really need to embark on many different, on advocacy with many different stakeholders to really capacitate them also to understand the benefits of renewables and that this is the way to go. So I encourage you, even, if some of you is also going, let's say, to be a banker one day, think about your part to play in the renewable energy future. So from this program, we realized that we needed, oh, sorry, let me just go back and explain what these photos are. So for example, like the first photo is, these are you know, colleagues from West Africa who are working in the ministries of energy. They convened for a training workshop, and this was in Ghana. The second workshop was when we trained entrepreneurs and financial institutions in Burkina Faso. We worked with an international university that's based in Burkina Faso for this. They also have a business incubation center that's helping students to go into the renewable energy business, develop their own businesses there. And the third picture is when we trained...
Sorry to interrupt a little bit, though. We have like a minute or two left, and we have to wrap it up in the next minutes. Yes.
Yeah, okay, okay. So, all right, let me then just go into, very briefly, into what this, you know, project sort of facilitated. And that was the creation of an even bigger project, which is an entrepreneurship support facility, because we needed to, you know, work with different partners and make this sort of one-stop shop for certain private sector and small companies to come to for assistance, so that we make them better companies who are able to develop bankable projects and access financing and develop quality renewable energy projects. So we did a lot of trainings all over the region. The picture in the middle is actually our lady entrepreneur from Nigeria, Habiba Ali. She's based in Kaduna in the north of Nigeria, and she's a great advocate for renewable energy. She's done some amazing you know, projects on the ground, mainly mini grids and small solar home systems. And also the picture in the bottom left is an association that we helped to create of solar professionals who are able to advocate for better, you know, regulations and policies that are more conducive for renewables. So learning never stops. What I realized from my work also is the need to understand policy and regulation and private sector and finance, and all of this came into the picture, not only engineering as I thought at first. So I had to do a certified expert course in renewable energy and climate finance. I also did one in SME finance, which is small and medium scale entrepreneur finance, because there's a whole angle of how do you finance these small scale entrepreneurs. And I also did a certificate in power systems regulation, because it's necessary to understand also the legalities of how do you promote renewable energy. But after my time at IRENA, I realized it was time for change. I'm actually now based at Practical Action in Kenya. And Practical Action is an NGO as well as a consulting arm, which uses basically appropriate technology to end poverty. So we work in many places all over the globe. West Africa, Central, East and Southern Africa on the continent. We look at helping, for example, refugee camps that you know, don't have energy access or that are reliant on handouts. We look at how are we able to give them the right technologies to be able to empower them, because you know, they are living in a camp with very basic infrastructure, and they are going to be stuck there for goodness knows how long, sometimes for maybe 2 generations, and they need to be given the means, you know, to also improve their lives and their livelihoods. We also look at the whole energy nexus of ending poverty. So we use solar, you know, water pumping systems to provide water in certain communities. We look at using improved cook stoves for our cooking needs, because in Africa we know that even in urban settings, for example, in Dar es Salaam, 80% of Dar es Salaam population uses firewood for cooking, which is not very good for the environment. It's not very efficient. And not to mention, you know, if we're cooking indoors, we have a lot of smoke that is also not good for our health. So how do we look at improved cook stoves that use less fuel, that are more efficient and that are better for the environment? So overall, as you know, for you high school students, like some of the lessons learned that I would like to impart on you, because I finished high school in 2006, so that was 12 years ago. So, you know, if I could tell my 12 years ago to myself what I know now, I would say that international exposure is priceless. yes, it's expensive to go out, of your city or your province or your country or whatever it is. But there are opportunities out there as long as you're motivated. There are scholarships, there are exchange programs. There is ways that this can be, this barrier can be overcome. It's important to broaden your scope and be transdisciplinary. If you are going into one single field, like how I went into engineering, don't only think about engineering, think about the broader spectrum of what you're doing. There is the financial aspect, the social and economic aspects of the projects you're working on. You need to be able to gather practical experience as soon as possible. So even if you're a student studying at university, try to get some internships, even if they're unpaid, even if you have to volunteer, even if it's part-time, just do it, get that ground exposure. Important, very important, learn another language. It opens so many doors for you. Mistakes and failures are equally important. I realize now that a lot of times when I really felt I hit rock bottom were actually, like one of my ways of actually excelling even more and using, those experiences to get even further. And, as you study or whatever it is that's your next step, taking time to find out what you really want to do is absolutely fine. Take as much time as you want. Just make sure you're not wasting any time. And at the end, thanks very much for listening. This is my Gmail address. You're welcome to reach out at any time. And I'm really happy that I was part of this, and sorry I took up so much time.
Thank you so much, Tiana. That was a lot of information packed there. I hope that the students, I believe that the students would have learned quite a lot from all the speakers we've had today. Unfortunately, we have only 4 minutes left, and I was wondering if Imagine Scholar the students have any comments or 1 or 2 questions, because I think the students need to get home on time, right? Ayana?
All right, we have a comment from Shadrach.
Hello. Yeah, it's just like throughout your presentation, I had there's some way. So basically, my question is, what motivated you to not to draw the towels down and then keep kind of like working on your project to stick on your passion?
Sorry, I didn't hear that very well. What motivated me to?
So throughout your presentation, I've heard you talk about there's some obstacles in the way that tried to stop you, but you didn't kind of like allow it to kind of like to control you. So basically, what motivated you to stick to your passion and continue to cultivate it much more?
Yeah, because, it always comes to a point in time, when you leave school, things are not always mapped out for you. And you come to a point where it's either you're going to, let your failure define you and you stop there and then you do what? Who knows? Or you use that as, an impetus to say, okay, I've really hit rock bottom, maybe not. But there's no way of, of going anywhere else except forward, and always understand that, sometimes these failures are just a sign for you to redirect a little bit. There's a better opportunity waiting for you down the line. Might take time, but it will come eventually, as long as you're persistent.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I love it. Cool.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Reach out anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have those that want to share 1 or 2 sentences about what they learned before we round it up?
Yeah, somebody want to share? Sorry, we're deciding amongst ourselves.
What about the students from Nigeria as well? Okay. But well, then we have to close the call recently, but
we have Gibbon who wants to just share a couple of comments.
Okay, great, go ahead.
Okay, so for me, I think something that I've learned from this experience is that, like with the journey through, like, the environmental sustainability, it's not always gonna be like a straight path towards like maybe success, or like maybe, let's say you envision like being something in the, like taking a certain career in like environmental sustainability. It's not always gonna be like a straight path, but then most times you're gonna zigzag until you get there. But then the most important part is the learning, like, starting small, like maybe like starting with going for like, like just trying something new before you like become like something that you imagine. Because I feel like all those small things, like they kind of build up to what you want to become. And, like as long as you keep on learning, that's how you're gonna get to a certain point at the end.
Great, thank you very much for that comment. I think we have one as well from the student in Nigeria. One final comment.
Good afternoon.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I learned so much from what being said. I learned about renewable energy. I learned how we can make the environment like more friendly, how we can consume energy more like in a good way that doesn't affect people. I learned about how we can make about microgrids, that we can make things more, like can make things easier, transfer energy easier. So I learned a lot of things. Also learned about how to use the things around us to generate electricity, like water, like sun, solar energy.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was wonderful. Thanks. I'm glad to know that you've all learned a lot, and this has been very much of an informative session. And thank you so much for to the speakers who have joined us, Colleen, Tiana, the whole Imagine Scholar team who initiated this in the first place, asking us to organize such a session for the students. Thank you to the students in Nigeria who joined us, to Akinle Show Media Program Coordinator, who made sure to kind of put everything in place for them to join us. I will send the slides from each of the presenters over, and also a link to the recording at the end. We're still open to collect any of your comments and questions at the end, so I will follow up with each of the coordinators at Imagine Scholar and also Akinle in Nigeria to gather your comments or any other further questions. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the weekend. We've learned so much about renewable energy, environmental sustainability, and how it's good for our future. And I hope that the students are encouraged. We have a few people there who can be the scientists, financial experts, the engineers, to build a sustainable future for Africa. And look forward to seeing the development in that front. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Sanma, for organizing all of this. Really, really appreciate it. And Adi and both of the speakers as well, Tiana and Colleen. It was great to hear from both of you. And thanks for everyone for coming from all corners of the earth for this webinar today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tiana, as well, for coordinating on that side.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks so much.
Have a good night.
Have a good weekend. Bye.